chairman of this evening's function and honorary chair of the Sustainable Development Chair set up by IGNOU, my good friend and Rajya Sabha colleague Dr. M.S. Swaminathan, Vice Chancellor IGNOU, Professor V.N. Rajashekharan Pillai, Executive Director for the Chair, Dr. S.K. Chopra, faculty, staff and students of IGNOU, representatives of the press and electronic media, viewers of this program in this auditorium who are visible, and around the country and the world who are invisible but nonetheless who are very much here, and friends. Humanity today is at a crucial crossroads in its long and tortuous history on this planet. We have unprecedented wealth. Science and technology have made astounding breakthroughs in the last 3 or 4 decades. Extragalactic cosmology, subnuclear physics, unraveling the human genome, the whole IT revolution, space travel. We have the technological competence today, if we use it with wisdom, to build a harmonious global society which is based upon fairness and equity. But also there are grave dangers that we face today. And many of these have been created by our very processes of development. We still have massive poverty and deprivation and malnutrition. At least 1/3 of the world's population of 6 billion people, at least 2 billion people are living on or just below the poverty line needed for a decent human existence. There's a population explosion in developing nations, global terrorism, whether the jihadi brand or the Nakshal brand, and global warming and climate change. I'm very happy that IGNOU has instituted this chair for sustainable development and that you have got a world-renowned scientist and highly respected intellectual in Dr. M.S. Swaminathan as the honorary chair, and a former Jawaharlal Nehru Fellow S.K. Chopra as executive director. I've been asked today to speak on sustainable development in the Indian ethos. I'm glad to do so because some people seem to feel that the concept of sustainable development began with Gro Brundtland. It didn't. She certainly did a magnificent job, but the concept itself goes back thousands of years and is very deeply embedded in our cultural tradition. I myself have been involved ever since I grew up in the beautiful surroundings of Kashmir. I've been involved in the Board for Wildlife and Project Tiger and so on. But I will not today talk about my personal experiences. But what I will try and do is to explore with you the deep-rooted reverence for the natural environment that is found in our cultural and spiritual heritage. The most holistic and comprehensive statement of environmental values in any scripture in the world is to be found in the astounding hymn to the earth, the Bhumi Suktam in the Atharva Veda. It has 63 verses, and I feel, Mr. Chairman, that these verses should be compulsory reading, mandatory reading for anyone who wants to understand the Indian ethos vis-a-vis the natural environment. I will read only 5 of these verses because all 63 would take too long, but I would strongly commend them to you for your study and perusal. Here are 5 verses from the Atharva Veda Bhumi Suktam, which dates back at least 4,000 to 5,000 years. Earth, in which lie the sea, the river and other waters, in which food and cornfields have come to be, in which live all that breathes and that moves, may she confer on us the finest of her yield. Earth, in which the waters, common to all, moving on all sides, flow unfailing day and night, may she pour on us milk in many streams and endow us with luster. Pleasant be thy hills, O earth, thy snow-clad mountains and thy woods. O earth, brown, black, ruddy and multicolored, on earth, the firm earth protected by Indra, On this earth I stand, unvanquished, unslain, and unhurt. May earth with people who speak various tongues and those who have various religious rites according to their places of abode pour for me treasure in 1,000 streams like a constant cow that never fails. Whatever I dig from thee, earth, may that have quick growth again. O purifier, may we not injure thy vitals or thy heart. I think this last verse particularly sums up in a most extraordinary manner what our approach towards development should be, sustainable development. Whatever I dig from the earth, may that have quick growth again. O purifier, may we not injure thy vitals or thy heart. In fact, that is what we have done. We have injured the vitals of the earth, and we have not been able to replace various irreplaceable elements in the natural environment. Then in the Krishna Yajurveda, we have the famous Sri Rudram addressed to Lord Shiva. And there are many epithets in that. There are many ways in which Lord Shiva is addressed. But many of them involve the natural environment. Namo vrikshebhyo harikeshabhya. I bow to the Lord Rudra, perceived in the trees with dark green leaves. Varnam patiye namaha. I bow to Shiva, the Lord of the forests. Aushadhinam namo namaha. I bow to the Lord who is the Lord of herbs and plants. Now this shows that our reverence for the natural environment is something that was very deeply embedded in our tradition, because the Vedas, after all, are the first, the most essential and the most important texts of our cultural tradition. But in addition to the Vedic injunctions, which may have been directed towards only a certain class of educated people, there are numerous customs and traditions built into our heritage that direct us towards conserving natural resources and encouraging sustainable development. A few examples. There is a concept of sacred trees, whether it is the peepal or the ashwatha or the vatavriksha. There are sacred trees which are not to be cut under any circumstances. The ideal is the kalpavriksha, the tree that gives everything. And they realize that if you can have certain trees that are very, very beneficial to society, then cutting those trees is a great sin, and it was strongly prohibited in ancient times. Then there were sacred groves. Not only sacred trees individually, but sacred groves dedicated to various deities. ये माता का वन है, ये शिव जी का वन है, ये कृष्ण जी का वन है. These are groves which were dedicated to certain deities so that people would not disturb them and would not destroy them. Then there were sacred ponds. Even today, Mr. Chairman, at least in Jammu and in Himachal and in Kashmir, there are sacred ponds where there's no question of any fishing being allowed. One of the most famous ones being the great spring in Verinag, from where the Vitasta, the Jhelum river, rises. It is a beautiful, huge pond teeming with fish, which is considered to be sacred. The fish in mutton next door are considered sacred. Similarly in Jammu, similarly in Himachal. So there are sacred ponds where no fishing is allowed. There are sacred rivers. Of course, all the rivers are sacred. The Ganga, the Yamuna, the Narmada, the Kaveri, the Krishna, each one of them is sacred. Unfortunately, we have succeeded in doing what was considered unconceivable. Ganga, which was supposed to purify everything and everybody, we have succeeded in making it impure. That has been the great achievement of human civilization over the last century. But if you still go beyond Rishikesh, when you see the Ganga coming out in all its glory, coming out of the locks of Shiva, you will realize how the sacred nature of these life-giving trees were built into our heritage. That is why they were worshipped. That is why in the end, when the ashes go, they also go into the Ganga. And that is why all over the Kaveri, the Kurg, people of Kurg worship Kaveri Amma. That is the only god that they worship. That is a river goddess. Then there are sacred plants. The tulsi, for example, is considered very auspicious, or the bilva, and they're kept in the homes. In every home, in most villages, you will find one sacred plant there. Chahe wo tulsi ho, chahe aur koi aushadhi ho. Because they are considered to be auspicious. That was also another way of getting the common people. As I said, the Vedic injunctions were perhaps for the elite, but these customs which flowed from that, these touched every single person regardless of class or caste or creed or religion or a language. Then there were sacred animals. Cattle, of course, were considered sacred because they produced everything. The cows produced the milk and the ghee and the fertilizer and the bullocks for plowing the land. So the cattle were always considered to be sacred, and they were to be protected. Even our constitution exhorts us to protect the cattle. And then every deity in Hinduism is associated with one or other, either a bird or an animal. Like Shiva is associated with the bull, Vishnu with the eagle, Kartik and Saraswati with the peacock, Lakshmi with the swan, Ganesha with the rat, Ayappan and Durga with the lion. And there are two types of lions. The Shiva Durga is the Durga mounted on the lion, on the tiger, and the Vishnu Durga is the Durga mounted on the lion. There's again, both the tiger and the lion are involved. Many people have asked me, what is the Vahan of Durga? So the Vishnu Durga rides on the lion, the Shiva Durga rides on the tiger. And with Dattatreya, for example, there are the dogs. So almost every animal is in some way or the other associated with one or other of the deities. And that is also a methodology whereby the reverence for life, the protection of the plants, of the trees, of the groves, of the streams, of the ponds, and of the animals and birds. The peacock, for example, is our national bird. This was all very much part of the Indian ethos, and an ethos directed towards sustaining and revering the natural environment. Now, even if we go to the Upanishads, which are, to my mind, the high watermark of Indian philosophy. I think the Upanishads, I was once asked, what is India's greatest contribution to the world? I immediately answered unhesitatingly, the Upanishads, because they contain so much wisdom and so much power and so much enlightenment. And there again, I want to quote one or two things with regard to food. And Dr. Swaminathan, of course, is an expert on food. I mean, he is the father of the Green Revolution, and hopefully will now father a second revolution also, because we need a new one. And he will, I'm sure, appreciate these verses regarding food from the Taittiriya Upanishad. I'm going to read out 4 verses, and just look at the way our rishis had envisaged the importance of sustainability. Respect food. The body is made of food. Food and body exist to serve the self. Those who realize the self within the heart stand firm, grow rich, gather a family around them, and receive the love of all. Waste not food. Waste not water. Waste not fire. Fire and water exist to serve the self. Those who realize the self within the heart stand firm, grow rich, gather a family around them, and receive the love of all. Increase food. Look what the Upanishads say, increase food. The earth can yield much more. Earth and space exist to serve the self. Those who realize the self within the heart stand firm, grow rich, gather a family around them, and receive the love of all. Refuse not food to those who are hungry. When you feed the hungry, you serve the Lord, from whom is born every living creature. Those who realize the self within the heart stand firm, grow rich, gather a family around them, and receive the love of all. Now, is this not astounding that the Taittiriya Upanishad, thousands of years ago, says, respect food, waste not water, waste not fire, increase food, the earth can yield much more, and refuse not food to those who are hungry. So these sort of exhortations are to be found in the most sublime philosophical and scriptural literature of our country. So therefore, when there is the impression is being given that this concept of sustainable development is only something that has been invented in the West and that we in the East really knew nothing about it, it's entirely wrong. I'm not suggesting that we lived up to this. If we had lived up to these exhortations, we would not be in the terrible crisis that we are today. But they are there, they exist in our cultural heritage. And I think it shows quite clearly how important these values are. Nonetheless, having said that, and I think I have said enough to show how deeply embedded environmental values are in our ethos, these values grew mainly in pastoral and agricultural communities. Today, with a population of over 1 billion, 30% urban, the whole situation has changed. But nonetheless, we should build on our ethos to spread public awareness through education, to try and educate our legislators, and to re-articulate these ancient values of our cultural heritage in modern idiom. Mr. Chairman, I feel that education is a vital input in this whole exercise, a vital component in what we are trying to do. IGNOU, I would like to congratulate IGNOU for taking the initiative. Our schools, our universities must spread environmental values. Environmental values should be built into the curricula of our schools, because unless young people learn, many children go to school in the cities, they have never seen a tree. Unless they are taught the importance of trees and plants and flowers in our lives, they will never grow up with an awareness of a reverence to nature. And this is a responsibility not only of the government of India, not only of the state government, but all the way down through the Panchayati Raj system down to the villages. Unless the panchayats, the village panchayats, get a renewed awareness of the importance of ecological security and ecological sustainability, no amount of glossy documents by the Planning Commission or by the Finance Ministry is going to work. Because ultimately, in a huge country like ours, it is the grassroots organizations. NGOs can help a lot. The NGOs can do a lot of work. There are already some quite good NGOs. I myself had something called the PCED India, People's Commission on Environment and Development India. And we have held 48 public hearings around the country, from the length and breadth of this country, in order to have a whole day's discussion on environmental values, on sustainability, where the people, common people and experts can react with us. There used to be a Vana Mahotsava at one time. I remember K.M. Munshi started it. That seems to have disappeared along with a lot of other things. But those are the sort of utsavas, those are the sort of functions that we should restart. Because when somebody plants a tree, it may be in your backyard, it may be in the school compound, it may be somewhere, but in the panchayat land, with somebody planting a tree itself is an act of faith in the future. Religious institutions can play a much more important role in spreading environmental values. In 1986, there was a remarkable meeting in Assisi. Assisi is in Italy, and it is the birthplace of the great Saint St. Francis of Assisi. It was his 700th birth anniversary. And there a meeting was held, organized by the WWF, it was then known as the Wildlife Fund, now it's the Worldwide Fund for Nature, and some religious experts. And there 5 declarations on man and nature were drafted by 5 different religions: Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism and Islam. I had the privilege of drafting the Hindu declaration. Subsequently, there was a Sikh declaration, a Jain declaration, Baha'i declaration, and so on. Now, those Assisi declarations should be read, because despite all the theological differences that exist, if you read the Assisi declaration, and if you don't have them, I will send them to you. They should be available to IGNOU and to anybody who is studying this, that when it comes to nature and the natural environment, there's an extraordinary harmony of views. Although the Eastern attitude is quite different, because we don't look upon ourselves as sovereigns over the world, we look upon ourselves as part of the whole creation. But nonetheless, when it comes to the actual implementation, you will find those declarations very important. I also feel that religious institutions, instead of giving prasad and laddus, they should give saplings. There are some institutions that give away saplings as prasada, so that you can go home and then you can, laddu to kha ke khatam ho jayega, you will forget it. But if you are able to plant a sapling, that will last you for a very long time. So my point is that what we need, Mr. Chairman, is a massive global coalition for peace, interfaith harmony and sustainable development. And India must take the lead in this because of our cultural heritage and because of the dire requirements that are forced upon us by the environmental crisis that we face. Now, sustainability, I was reading in the Indian Science Congress, there was a whole session on the science of sustainability, and I was reading Dr. Swaminathan's lecture there. Sustainability involves a deliberate change of lifestyle, both individual and collective. A few examples, take transportation. Our present transportation is a total disaster, because what we are doing is we are creating these huge gas guzzling individual cars, and we are not creating public transportation. We are not creating proper buses. The result is that the very rich can buy these cars for many lakhs, 40, 50 lakhs of rupees. But the waste that goes in, and the roads are clogged now. In Delhi, as you know, it's impossible to move after a certain time. The metro is helping, but what we need is public transportation. We need really top-class buses which can carry people around the urban areas. Now, urban transportation is an area which is going to create endless problems, environmental problems in the years ahead, unless we do something about it. There's a gross extravagance at weddings, particularly in Delhi. This new Bhangra culture that Delhi has adopted, with people dancing on the streets as if we don't have enough congestion as it is. You have these wretched baratis, वहाँ जाके नाचो, वहाँ के रास्ते में नाचते जाते, जहाँ से निकलते हैं नाच के जाते, क्या बदतमीजी है ये कौन सी संस्कृति में, कौन सी संस्था में? वो टेलीविजन देख के और मूवीज देख के आप लोग अपने शादी में भी वैसे ही नाचते हैं. कोई नाचने की जरूरत नहीं है, वहां जाके नाचिए आप जब पहुंच गए बहू के घर. रास्ते में नाचने की कोई जरूरत नहीं है किसी को. I mean, it's ridiculous. And the amount of waste, the illuminations that go on, well, how can I put it? The sort of, it's really obscene is the only word that comes to mind. The obscene waste of power, the waste of water, the waste of food. Generally also, you know, people don't switch off lights. We go around the house switching off our lights because the grandchildren leave the lights on. I mean, children are never taught now that when you leave a room, switch off the light. It's a simple thing to do. But this is not taught to anybody. So this is the ethos. When you see crores of rupees being spent on engagement ceremonies and on weddings, what are you going to do? What will the common man do? What will society do? So unless we create a social revolution also, unless we create a revolution where you can have your wedding, if you are very rich, you can give as much money as you like to your daughter or to your son-in-law, nobody is stopping you. But do you have to make a sort of an obscene presentation of wealth like that? I don't think that that is appropriate, and I think that is something which only society can change. Government cannot change. Government has passed a bill against dowry, but that doesn't prevent people. It is public opinion alone. And I think I must say there, South India seems to be in advance, because in South India I find there is still a certain amount of abstemiousness, there's still a certain amount of delicacy in the thing. But in the North, everything has gone totally berserk. And I feel that something needs to be done about this. Waste of water, dripping faucets, wherever you go, you see a faucet dripping. Either you cannot close it because it's not closable, or somebody has left it on. Every drop of water wasted is a criminal act, because water is you cannot live without water, and we don't realize it. But the next crisis that the world is going to face is as a result of water. So why do we not teach our children and our adults to conserve water and to conserve energy, and not to have wasteful expenditure? Then voluntary family limitation. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a point here. I'd like to get this off my chest. Family planning has become a dirty word. Even the ministry's name was changed. But what is happening now? We had made, when I was Minister for Health and Family Planning in the 70s, we had made 3 projections for the year 2000. Our most optimistic projection was 900 crores. The median projection was 950 crores, and the doomsday projection was 1 billion. And believe it or not, we crossed the 1 billion mark in the year 2000. We are adding the equivalent of 1 Australia every year to our population. And there is this, I must call it, I'm sorry to use strong words, there is this strange, I think it's a misleading theory, that India is a young country with a young population, and Europe is aging, and therefore the more young people we have, the better. I agree, provided you have young people who are properly nourished, who are properly educated, who are properly employed. A huge army of crores and crores of young people who are undernourished, who are malnourished, who cannot properly clothe, who are not educated, will they be a source of strength to India? I don't see how. So this bogus theory is being now put forward that no, don't talk about population explosion. This is the great advantage that India is going to have over Europe. I'm sorry, I for one do not accept this theory. I think that our exponential population growth is diluting the fruits of our very impressive economic development, and sooner or later we are going to run out of resources. How can you possibly provide for 1 Australia every year the food, the clothing, the energy that is required? Therefore, these all involve transformation of our own individual and collective behavior. So therefore, I would like to stress that although our environmental values, it is built into our ethos, we are not behaving in accordance with those environmental values. In fact, we seem to be behaving in the exact opposite direction of what our cultural ethos shows us. Now, over the last century, and particularly the last half century, as Mr. Chairman knows, there have been many attempts at involving global consciousness. I myself was a member of the Indian delegation to the first conference on the human environment in Stockholm in 1972. Indira Gandhi led that delegation. Olof Palme was those were the only 2 heads of state and government who were there, and I was on the Indian delegation. So I was in from the birth of the movement. When they decided about UNEP, and Maurice Strong was appointed Director General of UNEP. 1972. Then 1982, the United Nations adopted an almost forgotten document, the World Charter on Nature. It's a very good document. Nobody bothers about it any longer. Nobody talks about it. Then Stockholm plus 20, Rio, they had the Earth Summit, which came out, as you know, with Agenda 21 and a lot of very important things. And then in Johannesburg 2002, they had the World Summit. Each summit is getting bigger and bigger. Next time they're going to have a galactic summit. But the net result of all these summits is really that, nothing seems to be happening. America resigned from the Kyoto Protocol, which I think was a shame and a disgrace for the world's most powerful nation to do that. And we are all trying, I am involved in my own way, Gorbachev with his Green Cross, Dr. Swaminathan himself, so many. And now, in 2007, when the Nobel Prize was given, this is really a very encouraging factor. It was given to Al Gore for that film, An Inconvenient Truth, and to this great team of scientists led by our own Dr. R.K. Pachauri for the work that they're doing on sustainable development. So there is an awareness, but I'm afraid that awareness is not developing fast enough because the situation on the ground is deteriorating. Global warming is heating up. The glaciers are disappearing. I can see it when I fly into Kashmir every year. The mountain tops of Nun Kun, they are less snow than they had before. Satellite imagery shows us that the glaciers are receding very, very fast, much faster than we realize. And do you realize if the glaciers recede, that will be the end of the Jamuna, of the Ganga, of all the rivers, and there will be mass starvation in this country? The oceans are rising as a result. Several countries are going to disappear from the face of the earth, including the Maldives. Half of Bangladesh is going to be underwater. There will be millions of ecological refugees. What are we going to do with them? Where will they go? There's species are disappearing. The tiger is only the most dramatic symbol of the species. I was the originator of Project Tiger, I know it. They have also declined from 3,000 to 1,500, and they are now falling below the biological minimum. But other species, thousands of species of flora and fauna are disappearing. The ozone layer is attenuating. Food production is declining globally. And so it is really a very grim situation. As the Chinese say, they have a saying, it is later than you think. And I would like, in fact, as I close this talk, to bring out the sense of urgency that must inform all of us. This is not a leisurely occupation, a philosophical exercise which you can comfortably sit on your computers and work out when the world will come to an end. This is something that is actually happening in our lifetimes. In my lifetime, I have seen these changes take place, and by the time my grandchildren grow up, what will be the situation in India and the world? So, Mr. Chairman, where does all of this leave us? Precariously strung between hope and despair. That's how I would describe the present scene. We are precariously strung between hope and despair. But let me end by saying we cannot afford the luxury of pessimism or negativity. We must be realistic, but we have to strain every nerve, mobilize every resource to try and reach the millennium goals of sustainable development in the years and decades ahead, firmly based as these are on the Indian ethos and our rich pluralistic cultural heritage. And I'll therefore close with that great exhortation from the Kathopanishad, which exhorts us to arise and awake and walk boldly across the razor-sharp path ahead. There are no soft options left, Mr. Chairman, now, either individually or collectively. It is a difficult and dangerous path that lies ahead. But we have to mobilize our material, our moral, our intellectual, our ethical, our spiritual resources for one mighty thrust to break the shackles of poverty and to try and establish a sane and harmonious world. And that is what the Upanishad exhorts us to do. Uttishtata jagrata prapya varan nibodhata kshurasya dhara nishita durattaya durgam pathasat kavayo vadat.